Hey, it's Coach Taylor from SmarterTeamTraining.com. I got one good dude on the phone. I'm not going to lie to you. Again, I get a chance to read books and make it definitely a part of my weekly schedule to at least read a chapter or two chapters out of random books. And I enjoy reaching out to HumanKinetics.com and just going through and seeing what they have available, to be very, very honest with everybody. They've been a very good contributor to the events that I have put on all over the country, and I'm always really interested in what they're bringing and sending to me, so I can know a little bit about the book before they get it out. But Dr. Bryan Mann put together a book called Powerlifting, and we probably handed that out, maybe one or two copies out at every event this past year. And I hadn't had a chance to read the book. Recently I did. I reached out to Bryan, and he said, let's do this. I mean, Bryan and I have met each other several times throughout the conferences and events throughout the country. And it's cool to see a peer in the field that you can shake hands with and walk up to and talk shop just genuinely. Just have his name out there and do write a book up, and you have a chance to read his thoughts and again what has worked for him. And it's honestly a good honor, or a very nice a privilege for me to have you on the phone here, Bryan. I'm looking forward to just talking shop and obviously learning more from you every time I get a chance to we get a chance to just chat, man.
Well, thank you, Rob, for having me on here. I'm actually very honored to be on here with the different people that I've seen and listened to on your podcast here. So it's definitely an honor for me to do this.
Bryan, before we get started, man, I got a couple questions here, obviously, that talk a little bit about, how you got involved in the field and that type of thing. And I can Google all that stuff to find out your bio, your background. You can send it to me in 1998, whatever. It doesn't make a difference. But I'm interested in the passionate, man. How did you get involved in this field as far as the passion goes? What keeps you just striving along? I know you're in a research aspect of the field now. You're doing some really cool things, and it's got to come from an enthusiasm that's unknown to mankind scenario. Can you tell me a little bit about where your passion comes from and really what you're doing right now?
My passion comes from a pay it forward type thing. I was the kid that was, you've met me, and anybody who's seen me at the conference, it's no secret, I got a large red birthmark on my face. So weightlifting actually gave me the confidence. It improved my confidence, and also I thought if I got bigger and stronger than everybody else, they'd leave me alone, and that actually worked out quite well. You get bigger and stronger, and everybody just quits making fun of it. But that paying it forward, and I always try and give people the lessons that I learned through weight training, and use weights as a vehicle to. Rick McGuire, who's here at Missouri, who's got several books of his own in sports psychology. He always says that he tries to win kids with sport. And I try to win kids with weights. I try and use the weight room as a vehicle to improve them and enrich their lives going forward. Not so much caring what is their squat, what's their clean, what's their jump, but using these as lessons to move forward. And watching the kids grow into adults and mature in front of your eyes, that's what keeps me going. I could be done coaching, put my feet up and just research and work 30 hours a week and have a great time, but I choose not to do that because that is my passion, watching these kids grow up and being a part of that, being a part of what shapes them. That's what drives me. Anytime that I get a chance to sit down and talk with the athletes, I do. I try and go to lunch with them and et cetera, sit down and eat breakfast with them or dinner with them in the dining hall whenever I get a chance, just to continually work and help them grow. That's where my passion comes from.
Obviously, reading the book Powerlifting, I'm taking notes as I'm going through this concept. And one of the questions I often have for people who do acceleration, momentum-based exercises, and I don't mean it to be a derogatory scenario or slam-basing anything at all, but even like in a clean or something that just involves pure power with a bar and a weight. My question is, how do you justify the load relative to velocity? And to be honest with you, any listener here that's paying attention to this show and getting a chance to listen, Dr. Mann here is absolutely the man when it relates to this topic. Using Kendo units and some other scenarios I hope he talks about. If you have questions about how you develop the load and the patterning percentages, whatever you kind of build into your program, this question is something you need to pay attention to. So, Bryan, man, can you do me a big-time favor, obviously, and really explain to me how do you use velocity to dictate load?
Well, the first way basically is that we know that the body works in response to training by the set principle, specific adaptations to impose demands. And long ago, people over in the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc countries They followed around all the different Olympic lifters, and they were able to determine what was the appropriate load to develop X trait or Y trait, and what velocity was the bar moving. So by taking those velocities and, looking and trying to train those traits exactly, that is what we're trying to do. So, for instance, the way, how I really got keyed into it and really got, Missouri on doing the velocity-based training stuff is whenever we were doing our cleans, our Olympic lifts. I tell this story all the time. I had to do a 25-page paper for a mini thesis for one of my classes, so I decided I was going to kind of, cheat within the rules a little bit and write it about how cleans related to vertical jump. That any improvement that we saw in the clean, because that was a speed strength movement, would end up showing changes in the vertical jump, improvements in that, since that was an expression of speed strength, coming from the said principle side of things. Well, whenever I wrote the paper, figured I'd know how to do the stats in, put those in later. Whenever we actually went to learn the appropriate stat and I ran it, it turns out I was completely wrong. And I even went and sat down with the professor to make sure that I didn't do something wrong. And we had no relationship between our cleans and our vertical jump. And it made me step back and be like, what is going on here? And Coach Aggie and I sat down and talked about it for a while. And I said, hey, I've got experience with this thing called the linear positions transducers. If you want, why don't we get some of these? At the time, the only maker out there was Tendo. Now there's, Gym Aware, Push, Strength Sensei. There's tons of them that are out there now, but at the time, the only thing was Tendo. So I said, why don't we get these Tendos and let's put them on the bar and see what happens? Well, from the literature, from R.A. Roman, we knew that a clean for a guy that's about 5'10", he should be moving at 1.4 meters per second. Well, our guys were moving at 0.6 meters per second. So we were kind of expecting the adaptation of speed strength, and we were imposing the demand of absolute strength on there. So, it allowed us to really start to point into what we need to do. Likewise, if you look at images, we know that if we look at let's just look at the West Side stuff. Louis Simmons, the dynamic effort, 40 to 60%. Well, you can put 40 to 60% on the bar. You can move it slow, or you can move it fast. If you move it fast, you're actually developing strength speed. If you move it slow, you're working on a submaximal absolute strength. So it just allows us to quantify the exact trait that we're trying to do and make sure that we're moving the appropriate load for that given day. One of the things that has come out recently from over in Spain, I can't remember the university, it showed that there was a Gonzalez Badillo, I believe is the researcher. There is a near perfect relationship between percentage of 1RM and corresponding velocity, average velocity for things like squat, bench press, etc. So what does that mean? That means that if today that I'm training and my bench max is 300 pounds, if I'm moving 60% at 0.8 meters per second, I'm moving 180 pounds, right, at 0.8 meters per second. Well, 6 months go by, I said my prayers, took my vitamin, Tolkomania, live forever, and I'm benching 400 pounds. Well, now I'm moving 240 at 0.8 meters per second. It's still 60%. So that 180 that I've been using for my speed work at 0.8, now it's just simply too light. So I needed to adjust the weight. And the changes in strength are very sensitive. The changes in velocity are very sensitive to that. So for instance, things like in-season programming, you've got guys that play, let's just talk about football since it's going on right now. Somebody who plays 80 snaps versus somebody who plays 20 snaps. Well, that person who had 80 snaps had a lot greater outside stressors outside of the weight room than the guy who had only 20 snaps. So that if you prescribed a set percentage of 1RM, let's say it's 75%, for the guy who got the starter who got 80 snaps, that really might be like 90, 95% for him that day because he's already coming in from a very fatigued motor standpoint. For the other person, that 75% might be right on, or it might even be a little light because they don't have those outside stressors to deal with. So, velocity is, with its malleability of sorts, it allows you to do just so much, and especially with the autoregulation and training exactly what needs to be trained for that moment. You know the exact load for the exact trait. Once you get those things figured out, you know that from your annual plan that you wanted to be going from absolute strength, moving at like 0.3 to 0.5 meters per second on lower body, and then the next phase you want to go accelerative strength. Start working into the power, and you start going at 0.55 to 0.75, and then I want to transition into my strength speed, which would be 0.8 to 1.0, and then I transition into my speed strength, looking at that 1.1 to 1.4-ish, 1.5 meters per second, depending on amplitude, depending on the range of motion. You can just sit down and periodize essentially by trait and velocity, and never have to once worry about am I using the right load for that guy for that day, because that's what's going to be a function of the velocity.
I know that you've worked with power lifters. I know you do a lot of strength training stuff, and obviously being a strength and conditioning coach at the college level, you're doing a lot of sports performance stuff as well. I mean, when you're designing a training program, how do you differentiate between powerlifting, strength, and sports performance? Is there a continuum of all those things that you're always working within? Is there something that you extrapolate and say, this is what we're going to do today? I mean, as far as if I was an athlete of yours, I mean, how are you basing your program design around each one of those ideas and goals?
Well, basically, I use a lot of level system. Everything is going to be present at every level, right? There's going to be some strength work, some power work, et cetera. But, if somebody's coming in here and expecting that they're going to see us not doing Olympic lifts, they're incorrect. I believe that the Olympic lifts are great for developing speed strength. Typically, it's going to be the Olympic lift hybrids that I'm going to do. You can teach somebody how to do a shrug or a pull very quickly. Doing a full clean or full snatch, that's going to take some time. But we are going to have things for rate of force development like Olympic lifts or dynamic strength. We're going to have things for absolute strength. And really how we determine what that person is working on is something that I call the power strength ratio. I take the power that they're producing in watts, and I divide it out by total system load and squat. That gives me a raw number. I throw that in and get a standardized score out, and then I will know what does that person need. Do they need to work on rate of force development, or do they need to work on absolute strength to be able to progress in the way that that's going to give them the greatest results on the field? Some people, all they need to do is get stronger. It kind of goes back to that Tudor barbell. All strengths relate back to absolute strength for a while. And after you reach a certain threshold, then you need to start developing those special traits. That's strength, speed strength, reversal strength, yielding strength, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to just develop strength first. We're going to get strong first, and we're going to kind of see what needs to develop after that. Some athletes, they come in, they were, as Cal Dietz would say, they were weaker than kittens, and maybe all they ever do is absolute strength work. But then you get some people who come in that are a little bit more developed, and they don't improve their playing abilities and their transfer of trainers without doing significant rate of force development work or yielding strength or isometric or reversal or something like that, and look at those other traits. But everything that we do is quantifiable. We know exactly what the person, or where the person is in their development. So then we will know what that person needs to do to continually improve. We track all of that over their entire time here.
Again, I was going through the book here, Powerlifting from HumanKinetics.com, and as I'm taking notes, I'm curious to know, and again, you and I have discussed this several times also, are there exercises that you avoid or even encourage in your strength program? And I also want to expand that a little bit because I know you do more than just the strength stuff. Is there anything that you encourage or avoid in your speed program as well?
Well, what I always encourage is mechanics first, as far as like the speed and things go. By mechanics first, I'm really referencing back to the work by Hewitt et al., Myers et al., looking at the ACL prevention stuff. I always, knock on wood, I've got a 0.6% non-contact ACL rate with women's soccer over the past 10 years. And the average is over 10. And I think some of the differences are, what do we emphasize? Well, we emphasize mechanics. We make sure that if anybody is going into a lot of genu valgus, you have the knees knocking in, going in with that femoral internal rotation, that we do a lot of external rotator work for the hip to try and correct that. And we also will be practicing on the mechanics. We're going to do tons of those altitude landings and drop jumps and focusing on making sure that they are keeping their knees over their feet. And then the other things that we really emphasize, I emphasize posterior chain. My athletes, they will get really good at doing glute ham raises. They'll get really good at doing RDLs. They'll get really good at doing those Russian leans, Nordic hamstring curls, whatever you choose to call them. And if I have the time and capability, they'll get really good at doing reverse hypers. They'll also get good at squatting. And those things all play into a major role with ACL prevention, ACL tear prevention. So those are things that we're really going to focus on. And as far as avoid, I really don't avoid anything. I think that everything is a tool in your toolbox. You just have to know when to use it. And like I said a minute ago, I don't do a whole lot of full Olympic lifts. Now, why? Well, with a lot of my athletes, I don't have time to teach them as much. And also coming from my background, and something that I believe in, is that you've got to go with what your strengths are. And obviously my background, I wrote the book Powerlifting. My background's going to be in powerlifting. It wasn't called Olympic weightlifting. So I'm going to find other ways to do the speed strength as well as the Olympic lifts. So we'll do some clean pulls, we'll do some snatch pulls, we'll do different things like that, and we'll also do speed squats, and over speed squats. And we'll find ways to develop speed strength in other means. But there's nothing that we truly avoid. But I'm going to get more out of the hybrids and the other ways of achieving speed strength than I will for the full Olympic lifts. For one, that I don't have time to teach them, and two, I'm probably just not the best Olympic lifting coach out there. There's a lot of people who can make people do Olympic lifting better than I can. So I always just go with my strengths there. But there's nothing that I avoid. Use everything. You just have to know when to use it and how to use it.
I want to talk to you a little bit as a powerlifting competitor, that type of stuff, and I want to revolve this conversation around the bench press competitions as a whole. But I want to avoid the chest, anterior deltoid, tricep scenario, that conversation, because we can discuss that over and over. But is back training important when preparing for a bench press competition?
Oh, absolutely. Holy cow! Yeah, whatever you're lowering the bar, in your front side is lengthening out, your backside is contracting, right? And you need to be able to squeeze the shoulder blades together and keep them into the proper position, or else you lose your arch. And by arch, I'm talking about the upper back's arch. So that upper back staying nice and tight, arched in, you're pulling inches off of your bench press. If your lats are weak and it lets go scapula fall apart at all, you're essentially, during the movement, you're increasing the range of motion that you're doing. And, just like anybody, would you rather pick up a heavyweight 4 inches, or would you rather pick up a heavyweight 6 inches? I'm going to want to push it that shorter distance. So, yeah, absolutely. The lats, the bigger and stronger that they are, the more force that they can produce and the more force that they can absorb, the bigger your bench is. I still have yet to see anybody with a huge bench without a big back.
I want to talk a little bit about that transition from high school athletes coming into college. And one conversation that most, let's say, even in the football community or up and down the athletic continuum at this point, even young ladies, their parents are starting to ask, how can they get their lifts up or their numbers up? I want to revolve this conversation a little bit around the squat as a whole. What advice would you have for players that want to get their squat numbers up?
Well, the advice that I would have is train the weak link. Don't just squat. Because if you just squat, you're going to hit this plateau. And this plateau is going to be whatever your weakness is. And the weakness is going to show up through the form. Is it somebody that is having problems with ankle mobility? So then they're having to go into lumbar flexion. So that flexion to extension, that's going to be a limiting factor. Is it somebody whose external rotators of the hip are weak, so their knees are caving in? Is it somebody whose knees are shooting way out past their toes, so they have a weak posterior chain? You've got to find what the weak link is and just improve the heck out of that. And knowing a lot of athletes whenever they come in, usually it's two things. It's posterior chain and it's external hip rotators. Those are the two things that if they, bring those up, all of a sudden their squats go up hugely. You know, it's not uncommon for over 6 to 8 weeks, you know, about 6 to 8 weeks in the spring, whenever I've got my women's soccer team, to see people squat go up 100 pounds, especially in the younger. I'm not saying every year, but that, you know, that freshman to sophomore transition, the first time that they come in and they get to squat heavy with me and we go up in strength, we'll go up 100 pounds. And it's not because I had some magic squat program. It's just that we brought up the weak link. So they'll never see those type of gains again. But, you know, that also is going to help them with injury prevention in the future, because what is the muscle that keeps the tibia from shearing forward and causing an ACL tear? Well, it's the posterior chains, the hamstrings wrapping around the anterior part of the tibia. What is the part of the squat that keeps the knee from going into genu valgus? Well, it's the external rotators of the hip, which are going to prevent the knee from caving in and doing another mechanism of ACL tear. So we're going to work on those weak links to improve their squat rather than just squatting, because not only is that going to cause their squat to go up, but they'll have a better transfer of trainness as well. By transfer of trainness, I mean that it's going to have a greater carryover effect to their sport. And to me, that's what it's all about. If I make your squat go up 75 pounds and you don't get any better at your sport, then I wasted both of our times. And I probably, you know, if we're in the private sector, I wasted your money. So I want to make sure that we can make the greatest bang for the buck. Let's have the greatest transfer of trainness to the sport, you know, and we'll set up our exercises to do that way. We might have some variations within things to do that.
I know that you're a coach. I know you've been coached. I know you've been in the meetings where conversations get kind of heated and heavy, and you got to get outside the office there and shake someone's hand and relax a bit, because it's not everything's always personal. I mean, how do you develop the relationships with your coaches, your administrators, your players, and even the staff that you work on through building trust and the communication with the people you work and train with?
You know, I think that really comes from the top down, and that has been a strong point of Pat Ivey, who's my boss here at Missouri and has been for 10 years. You know, he has just been, it's almost supernatural the way that he is able to operate and do that sort of thing. We'll have different questionnaires and different things that we'll work on, and we'll learn how to better interact with each other. And that was huge, especially the first time we did it like 7 or 8 years ago, to understand that, you know, here's how an extrovert is, and here's how an introvert is, and here's how, you know, an introvert sees an extrovert whenever they do this, and here's how an extrovert sees an introvert when they do that. And, you know, we went all through that Myers-Briggs stuff and the Philo-B stuff, and we've done a lot of different developmental things off of that as a team. So we learned how to interact the most efficiently. And understanding that also keeps peppers from flying up. You know, I might not agree with what you do, but if I know you on a deep and personal level, then I can understand why you do something a certain way. And I still might not agree with it, but as long as I understand it, I'm not going to be getting upset about it. So, you know, building those deep relationships is one of the biggest things that we've done as a strength and conditioning staff to approach that. Having heated discussions for us is, it happens, but whenever it happens, it's always a good thing. Everybody always leaves thinking, man, that was a great meeting. You know, I'm glad we got that stuff ironed out. And as for the sport coaches and administrators and things, it's time. Getting in there and you're earning their respect. You make sure that they know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and getting to know them again on a personal level. Like my AD that's over soccer right now. Whenever he and I are together, we actually don't talk about soccer too much. We're talking about music. He's a blues musician. And, you know, one of my passions is my ways that I blow off steam is by music. So we'll be talking about different bands and things like that. And then we'll eventually get to the soccer stuff, you know, and the soccer-specific things as far as from the administration goes. And with the sport coach, you know, one of the things that I learned from Pat is it is amazing what sort of relationship you can build if you just go to lunch with somebody. Just getting out of your office, going to lunch, spending time with them, and going about things and learning how that person ticks, them learning you, you know, and being able to get on the same page, all just from going to lunch together. It's been really amazing just to see how those relationships develop through those simple things.
I've had an opportunity to sit down with you guys as a staff and just in a hotel room, to be very honest with everybody that's listening to, or even the foyer of hotels for that matter. And we just talked about professional development and the value of it and how you guys are going about doing it, to be very honest. I mean, how important is professional development to you and your staff? And then how do you guys incorporate it into a busy week?
So the way that we do things, again, this is top down. This is something that Pat has done from day one, is that we have weekly staff meetings. And in those weekly staff meetings, we'll do many different things over the course of the year, working on professional development, working on, improving our ability to interact, improving our email skills, improving our scheduling ability, improving our knowledge base. We have staff books that we'll read, and we'll go over things together. We've done some in the past that have been more strength training oriented, and we've done some that were more leadership and administrative oriented. Things like Hans Selye's The Stress of Life, so everybody understands how the body responds to stress as a whole and not just training. We've done things like 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Start with Why, Joe Ehrman's book, that Transformational Leadership. There's so many different books that we've gone over as a staff. We usually do about one a semester. And we learn great amounts from that. And what do? Well, we are continually implementing those things throughout the week, and we talk about in our meeting, okay, this is, we approached this problem last week. How could we approach it better? How about, through this other lens over here that we're viewing at it? How about we're looking at it and start with why? If we're trying to approach this problem from a start with why lens, how would things have been different? And so and it's not necessarily whatever has happened that week. We might bring up something that's happened, in the previous semester or previous years, and look at adjusting it from that standpoint. And that's one of Pat's strengths is, and he's been doing that with us since day one, like I said. But professional development isn't something that just happens. A lot of people like to go out and talk about professional development, and it seems like that's all they do is they talk about professional development, not even that they know actually what it is. It's like, we want to do more professional development. Well, what is it? Where is it? Where are you and your staff now that, what do you need to improve on? Do you need to improve on the basic strength and conditioning knowledge? Do you need to improve on the leadership? Do you need to improve on email skills? Do you need to improve on interpersonal skills? You need to get better at soft skills? What is it that you need to do to professionally develop? And if you don't prioritize it, it's never going to happen, because there's always going to be something more important. There's always going to be that, I'd rather work on this program right now. I'd rather go, I need to schedule a meeting. You know what, I could do it at this time because all we're doing is this professional development meeting, so I'll schedule my meeting with the coach here. It's got to become a priority, just as anything else. And if it doesn't, then professional development will fall by the wayside.
I know you're making a big-time impact on the field, my man, through the book, obviously. I know you speak all over the place. I know you do interviews on YouTube and through other avenues. I know you're speaking around the country. I know, obviously, you're in the huddle, you're in the lab, that you're doing a tons of things in this field that are just really contributing very positively to the field. If there's something that you could give to somebody as far as a motivational message, if they're around you, what's one big inspirational message or motivational message that you hope that they take from you?
Man, it is. Growth only comes through continuous effort and struggle. There's nothing that we ever do that's easy. Anything that we do that's going to impact the field is going to take a lot of hard work. And while people might see it just one day and think something just happened, man, we've been working on it for 10 years. Growth only comes through continuous effort and struggle. And you only esteem that which you had to work for and that you value. Those are the two things that really hope that anybody who ever comes around me learns, is that whenever you're here, we're going to grind. We're going to learn. We're going to have a good time, but we are going to grind. I'll be in here at 5 in the morning, and I won't go home till 7, 8 o'clock at night a lot of times, because I'm trying to wear so many hats, and my wife gets pissed about that sometimes.
Well, Dr. Mann, I know it was very easy for me to reach out to you. I know we're connected on several social media accounts, and I have obviously your phone number and email address, that type of thing, pretty easy for me. But if somebody else wanted to reach out to you, whether it was to ask some questions about the book, whether to find out where you're speaking, or maybe even contributing to some of the meets that are in that area or around the country for that matter, I mean, how can they go about reaching out to you?
Well, the easiest way is going to be Twitter and Facebook on social media, to be completely honest. It's at Twitter, it's at @JBryanMann. That's my Twitter. And then I'm on Facebook as well. It's Bryan Mann. It's there's several Bryan Manns on there. It's the big ugly dude wearing a bench shirt. That's me on Facebook. Email is another good way to get a hold of me. MANN, J as in James, B as in Brian, @health.missouri.edu. I always will say that if I don't get back to you in 2 days, email me again. I just simply missed it. Sometimes I'm getting 150 and 200 emails a day, and I just miss stuff. I always try to respond to everybody that I can. I try and do it within a day. And if it goes that second day, that just means that I missed it.
Well, Bryan, man, I appreciate you taking some time out of your day here to contribute to the project. Again, anybody that's out there listening to this show, do me a favor. Go to humankinetics.com. It's not really a plug, but what this guy is doing for the field, I think it's cool if we get a chance to read what he's putting out there. And if you get a chance to pick up Powerlifting, the book, and shoot him an email and ask some questions, I'm sure that he will get back to you in a timely manner. And, again, I think your time will be well worth the effort that you put into it. So, Bryan, man, I appreciate all you're doing for the field, man. I applaud your efforts and your passion for what you're doing for the kids and the research that you're putting out there. And, man, it's great to call you a friend, Big Dog. It's awesome to be a colleague of yours in this field, and I look forward to keeping in touch, my man.
Thank you so much, Rob. I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and I appreciate all the things that you're doing through your website and the educational means that you guys are doing through that.
Good luck, Big Dog. I hope all's well this season, and I look forward to keeping in touch, man.
Thanks. Sounds good. You too.